forward so you guys get a copy of this. And I'm going to go ahead and stop my webcam. If I can get back to my little thing here and go to my presentation. All right, so I was asked to talk for about 20 to 30 minutes or so. I'll definitely not do more than that. And because I want to leave lots of time for you guys to have questions. So there's a lot of slides. This is a presentation I just recently did, actually, that I can easily build out to 90 minutes. So there's a lot of content in here, pun intended, but I'll try to just get to the gist of it. So as Jack mentioned, I do have some odd credentials because I do own a company and I am also a faculty member. I'm also the president of our local STC chapter here, STC Carolina. So I really live in both worlds, which has been my goal for the past couple of years, to really kind of, live part of the time in industry and part of the time in academia. But my day job is definitely as a faculty member. So that's my background. So this presentation is called Introducing Content Strategy, the Future of Technical Communication, ? I like to put that very gutsy question in there because I think that we're really headed that direction. I think that content strategy is going to become increasingly important to what we do in TechCom, and I think there's quite a bit of data to show that. So I'm just going to kind of jump in here, and like I said, I'll talk at you for about 20 minutes or maybe a little bit longer, and then we'll have a Q&A. So if I can get this to advance, there we go. So what is content strategy? This is my personal definition. I define content as useful information that people will see. So you can think of content as, information, obviously, but information can be in a lot of venues, right? You can think of, I like to use the example of a journal, which I don't know if anyone from your generation actually, thinks of journaling anymore. But growing up, we did a lot of journaling, my generation, the Gen Xers. So we would create these journals. No one would ever see them. Is it content? Sure. But, people aren't going to see it. So when we think of content, we think of it as facing someone else, facing an audience. Strategy is, in my definition, a means of achieving a goal. So content strategy is a goal-driven activity. It's not something that you can kind of do haphazardly. It's not something that is exactly the same as marketing, where you're just trying to get your message out to as many people as possible. It's very strategic, and it's about directing your strategy towards specific goals that you're trying to achieve. So Kristina Halvorson is a really great source on content strategy if you're interested in reading more, and I'll make sure you guys get a recording of the final screens in this presentation because there's a lot of readings by her. Kristina said 10 years ago, content strategy plans for the creation, publication, and governance of usable content. So this was when she was asked by Alista Part, I believe, to define the field that was emerging at the time. This is what she said. So you see planning in there, you see creation, publication, governance, and you see usable content. Okay, so this definition has been, I think, one of the most impactful when it comes to the way people think about content strategy. Why is content strategy important? So I like to give some data about what's going on in the world outside of academia. And this includes us as academics, right? Because we fit into these categories. But when people talk about content strategy beyond academia, this is a lot of the stuff they think about, okay? So the fact that 80% of people are now shopping online before making a purchase, right? The fact that 70% of people won't buy from or use a poorly designed website, right? 66% of people make decisions about a brand based on a company's website. And this is data that, these are the current figures, right? So this is becoming increasingly important, but it's also changing on a weekly or daily basis, right? So these numbers are only going to go up. 50% of people now shop on mobile devices, at least some of the time. And these are all averages too, right? So there's definitely, I have a client right now through my company, and we're looking at their traffic, and 80% of it is from mobile. So it's very easily, going to be much higher than this, depending on the organization. You have about 10 to 20 seconds to hook a website visitor. Again, this depends on the venue. That's an average. This assumes the web, not the mobile web, but you don't have a lot of time, is the point, right? And this is something I think we know very well in tech comm. Usability is key to customer retention, right? This is interesting for our field, though, this last statistic, and I think it's one of the most important. 70% of people cite post-purchase content and support as a key factor in future purchasing decisions. So not only do people want to get a product or service, they want to get a support package, largely for free, right? We all are consumers of various products and services. I like to use Evernote as a perfect example. So if you look at the cost structure of Evernote, which is a great app, by the way, for academics, it's a note-taking app. So, they're like, okay, how much are people going to pay for this note-taking app that it's going to allow us to make money? And they came to the number $50 a year. So all Evernote really makes off of people like me who even subscribe to it, because there's a free version available, right, is $50 a year. And how do they hold on to that in a marketplace where there are dozens of productivity apps and note-taking apps, right? It's their post-purchase content. When you sign up for Evernote, they give you a series of 6 emails, and they say, we're going to send you 6 emails, the first email says. And these 6 emails are going to introduce you to Evernote. But the last email says, basically, here's our blog. So, you're going to want to go there and people do. They have a very strong content strategy, and that's why they're the leader in what they do, basically, even though they're only charging $50 a year. Right? So this is kind of the world of content strategy. People have traditionally been taught that when people are looking for products and services, that this is what they do. They become aware of a product or service, familiar with it, they consider it, they make the purchase, they become loyal, right? It's a funnel. And this is coming from McKinsey and Company, a high-level firm that keeps track of lots of different data points out there. And one thing they looked at is they said, well, is this still true? Is this still true, basically, in the era we're in now, an era of search engines and social media and all this stuff? And they said, no, absolutely not. It looks like this. When consumers get ready to make a purchase, they go through active evaluation, okay? They gather their information, they make the purchase, but what determines where they go next in this loop is the post-purchase experience, okay? So if they're having problems with something, and we know this as people interested in technical communication, right? Because we're often the people who have to deal with those problems. Oh, the application didn't work. We need to create documentation. If the documentation isn't good, they're going to have a problem. That's what that trigger is. And there's 2 ways they can go. They can go back to active evaluation and start looking for something else, or they can say, oh, this is helpful. This organization helped me, and so now I'm gonna stay loyal. But they're very fickle, basically, right? We have so much access to so many different types of products or services that post-purchase experience is becoming increasingly important. So this is what Kristina Halvorson says that I think it really encapsulates where we're at with content strategy. Well, while organizations have struggled for decades, she says, centuries even, to make sense of their content, they were always able to keep the chaos and consequences to themselves. Then came websites, which created the perfect content strategy storm. Suddenly, organizations had to put all of their content, product info, investor reports, press releases, etc., in one place for the first time for all the world to see, and it hurt. Okay, and this, this book was written a while ago. I think it's just as relevant today as it was then. But you could rephrase this quote now for mobile. But the point is, what that useful information is that people will see. The content of content strategy has changed dramatically, right? How many times have we been on an organization's website and we found information that we're like, am I supposed to be seeing this? It's not really, set up well. It's not really, useful or usable. Okay. So people are in a crisis over content strategy right now. That's where we're at. We're still in this crisis moment of trying to figure out how to get relevant content to our users. Okay. So very relevant for a chapter of the STC. I like to then say, okay, so if that's what content strategy is, what is technical communication? And again, here's where, as academics, I'm sure many of you in the room would dispute this. I've had colleagues say, oh, it's not inclusive enough, this definition. But I think it gets to the core of what TechCom is about. You have to keep in mind that the STC, though they are very friendly to academics, they are a society of practitioners. And so they think about what do technical communicators do, not necessarily what is the field of technical communication, right? But they identify these two things. They say communicating about technical or specialized topics, and they say providing instructions about how to do something. And then there's a third bullet point, which I don't really buy into, so that's my critique of their definition. But I think these two are pretty solid, okay? I think many of us can agree that we are communicating about technical or specialized topics, and we're providing some form of instructional design, okay? So, I've got tons of examples. I'm going to skip through these. These are all examples from my research, someone else's research, but there's lots of examples of these, of people managing content basically as technical communicators, okay? But what I want to get to is this slide, because this slide is where we kind of get to the jumping off point of where I start trying to convince people that content strategy is what TechCom is going to morph into and is already morphing into, okay? So in the left column here, we have skill sets in TechCom. And again, many people would dispute these, right? There's localization, there's translation, there's all these different things that we do. But what I'm trying to get to is things we can all agree on, right? I think we can all agree that if you're a technical communicator, you need to be good at writing, right? You probably need to know something about editing. You probably need to know something about usability. You need to be able to work in a cross-functional team, and you need to be able to pick up and adapt to tools, right? I think there's none of those things that we can say, no, technical communicators definitely don't do those things. If you look at the skill sets in content strategy, though, those first 5 are the same. You're hard-pressed to find a content strategist working in the world who has no background in TechCom, and they exist. Kristina Halvorsen is an example. She was a web designer back in the day. That was her her thing, and she's largely, her book is called Content Strategy for the Web, so she's largely become a web-focused content strategist. How to make websites work from a content strategy standpoint. Okay. But she still has all those skill sets, right? She says in her article, you need to be a good writer to be a content strategist. You need to be a good editor. You need to understand how usability improves content. You need to work with teams, and you need to be able to use lots of tools, okay? The only difference is some additional skill sets that content strategists use, okay? One of those is search engine optimization. You will be hard-pressed to find a person who's working as a content strategist. Now, there are different terms out there. So you may see things like content developer or content manager. That's different. A content strategist is somebody that's kind of like a user experience specialist. They do a broad range of things. You're not just a usability person. You're doing wireframing and blah, blah, blah. So the same works with content strategy. So you'll be hard-pressed to find a content strategist out there who doesn't know something about search engines, because that is the way that content reaches people in today's day and age, right? Content auditing. This is a huge part of what content strategists are called to do. In I have taught this what you're seeing, this presentation as both a university-based class for our grad students here at ECU, and also I taught it in the fall, and I just started teaching it again as a class for people in industry through the STC. And it's amazing to see the problems that come out of the industry side of things. I had an individual in my class in the fall who said, here's my problem. I have 1,000 pages on my company's website. I'm pretty sure all of them are terrible. What do I do? That's content auditing. That's when you have to inventory all that stuff. You have to, manage it, and it's tough, right? That's a lot of the work of content strategy is doing audits. Content management is the part of content strategy where you're managing it on an ongoing basis. Once you wrangle those 1,000 pages, you want to figure out how to not get in that boat again. And it's amazing, and Jack can tell you this because he works with me through Content Garden. We get these clients who, their story is largely the same. It's like, well, we built this website years ago, and it's in this content management system. We just kept adding content, and then we get it, and it just is a nightmare, right? We send it through our SEO tools we use, and the SEO tool just like practically breaks down, right? It's like there's so many errors, just errors compounded within errors. That's what happens if you're not doing this stuff, if you're not managing your content. Okay? So, and again, I have lots of examples of these three skill sets, but I want to go to this. And you will recognize the second name on this case study, and it's a good read. If you search for, Getto and Labriola 2016, it's the only thing that we we published together that year. So you'll find the article, and it's in IEEE, and it's really a good window into what I mean as content strategy as tech comm and vice versa. So basically, we did a case study of this company called iFixit, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. And we really tried to do a deep dive, though, because many people have heard of iFixit. They know that they're this, the free repair guide for everything written by everyone. That's their slogan, right? But Jack and I were interested in looking at them as a technical communication company. Like, what are they doing to, again, communicate complex information and to help people learn, right? And so what we found was they had created this content management system. It's a wiki, but it's also a content management system, and it's completely open source. We didn't know that when we started, but you can take the technology that iFixit has created for their wiki, and you can use it to create your own wiki on any topic, okay? It's XML based, and those of you that aren't familiar with XML, it's, there's no, I would argue, standard language that technical communicators in industry are using, but if there was one, it'd be XML, right? XML is very common. It's used in things like DITA and all these different frameworks that, those people that are trying to wrangle 1,000 pages of content, they're using XML largely. It's user generated. We did not know this, but a lot of the content you will see on iFixit is created by everyday users, including students, because they have a whole service learning thing to do, right? But it is also expert moderated. So they have people that, work with their wiki, just like Wikipedia, but better, right? Because you don't necessarily have to be an expert to moderate Wikipedia. They have these experts who are sort of promoted from the ranks of the users, though. They're very education focused too, which I think, is important if you're trying to, if your mission is, for everyone, by everyone. That's what it's right in there in their slogan, right? You need to be committed to educating your users, not just selling them a product. They do a lot of usability testing over there. I've talked to them extensively over several years beyond the case study. They're usability testing and prototyping all the time. And they're paying attention to SEO. You Google how to fix my blah, blah, blah device. They're always in the top search results because they want people to find their documentation. That's their entire business model. And what they've done really is they've built their content management system. They've built their content strategy right into their system. So if you log in to their wiki, which is you create a free account, it immediately surfaces a way of interacting with it, right? A way of using content and creating content. Okay, what do you want to create, user? Do you want to create a guide? Are you creating a device page? Do you want to create your own wiki on a topic, right? Then, however, there's another layer, which is the moderator layer. So they have a sort of back-end panel that gives them a window into what people are doing. And every edit on this, the scale of this thing, they get like 9 million hits a month or something like that. That's outdated. That was a couple of years ago. So I'm sure it's increased. It's huge. And they moderate every single edit that goes through that wiki. How do they do that? Okay. So this was what Jack and I extrapolated from this case study. This is our view of their content strategy. And we checked this with them and they said, yeah, that's pretty much it. They didn't have it. It was interesting. They didn't really have it written down in this way, as a series of premises. But they said this was accurate. Okay. So the first thing to do when you're coming up with a content strategy is you need to think about what does user interaction look like for your content. So, right, we're not creating static content anymore. It's not a user manual. It is some form of user forum, right? Or maybe even a wiki that users are contributing to. And you've got to think about that, okay? A lot of organizations now, again, are building their content strategies right into the technologies they're using. Rather than creating documentation to help people use the content, it's built right into the technology. It surfaces right there as soon as you sign up for an account. Okay. Moderation, redundancy, and multimodality. So these were things we identified as patterns we saw over and over in the iFixit wiki. So if you look on the right side there's the fancy infographic that I created that it took way too long for me to create. But you've got administrators, moderators, and users, right? So the administrators have the most privilege in the system. They're the people who work for iFixit. But the moderators, as I mentioned before, are actually people promoted from their user base. So once a user has engaged with the wiki enough and they've started creating enough content for them, they say, you seem pretty invested and you seem to know what you're doing. Would you like to moderate some stuff? And they're, to make this make sense, there are thousands, they call themselves fixers in this community. And this is what they love to do. They love to create repair documentation. Like that's their thing, right? And they love to fix stuff. And so they're happy to do that. And that's what keeps the iFixit wiki going, is their moderators, their fixers. They've also created redundancy though, okay? These checks and balances. For example, probably one of the furthest afield user they have are college students, right? People who are undergraduates, they've never created documentation before. Maybe they're in this intro to technical writing class, and they partner with iFixit, and iFixit sends them devices. Jack actually did this as a student, so we can tell you about this. They help you repair the device and then document it. Well, as you can imagine, any student work, right? Not all students are going to be entirely successful. Well, then they have other, groups that they've sort of, the students have become more advanced and they're really good at the documentation, so they check the work of the other students. So there's all this redundancy that happens. And finally, multimodality, right? They know their audience. Their audience is largely millennials, right? That's a big core of what they do. They do have some people from the Gen X, community and older, but a lot of them are younger because those are the device users, right? And so, research on millennials says very few millennials are unimodal, right, in their learning. They want to see information in video. They want to see, so all their repair is documented through photos at each step. It stages the information. Here's the steps to repair this device. But then there's often a video of someone actually repairing the device. You can just watch, okay? The other thing that they reported to us was that they iterated their strategy over time a lot. They did not start out thinking of it as a wiki. It was always a wiki technology, but they didn't think that people were going to want to contribute. And then they figured out that all these people were making comments and saying, this isn't right. You should do this instead of this. And so they built their strategy as the users sort of demanded it, basically. And then the last thing was, they talked a lot about collaboration and how you have to think of content strategy as a collaboration between you and your users. And I think that's really, really smart and right on, because you don't, again, want to think of you, the content strategist, you're just publishing this content and then the users passively consume it. You want to think about how are they going to use your content and what can you do to facilitate that, basically. So I'm gonna shut up in a second here, and just kind of we'll ask some questions. But again, there's a lot of work out there. You should check out if you're interested in content strategy. Here's some of that work. Managing enterprise content is great if you're thinking about larger organizations and how they scale. The language of content strategy is a great sort of encyclopedia of content strategy. And then Sarah O'Keefe is just really brilliant, and Scriptorium that she works for is a big content strategy focused firm. This is interesting. I just recently found out about this, but Adobe has launched this thing called Experience Manager, which really is about content strategy. They don't really call it that because people in the tech comm community are not, so big on content strategy yet, but it really is an app to manage content across all these different platforms. This is from Kristina Halvorsen's company. It's just kind of a rundown of what the different aspects of content strategy are. This is a course. I left this in here because this is a course that I actually, this is the STC course that I teach. It's a 6-week course. And so this is basically what I go through. I break down the course in these 6 weeks, and I kind of shotgun these industry folks through it. And it seems to work pretty well. I really thought it was too much at first, but they seem to get a lot out of it. The feedback from the fall was very positive. And like I said, I'm teaching it again to them. So again, I'll capture this for the recording, but there's lots of books out there that are really great. These are the books that I kind of use in my teaching and in my research. So these are the 5 books I recommend to pretty much anybody interested in content strategy. There's some kind of core articles out there that I often assign in my courses and cite in my research. So, these are some of those. Blogs. There aren't a lot of blogs on content strategy, honestly. There's way more on tech comm in general, but Scriptorium is a good source. Content Garden, that's my company. We publish a blog post every week. So we've got a big blog that deals with a lot of content strategy related topics. Content Marketing Institute. Content marketing is a little different, but it borders on content strategy, and there's a lot of good information out there. And then the Content Wrangler is another company that does content strategy. Really, that's their entire MO, and they've got a lot of great information on there. There's also some great templates out there. If you're trying to build your own content strategy, I highly recommend these. Mine is in there that I created after I got tired of trying to teach students, right? And then it was like, well, how do we do this? And so I finally created a system for them to use. And then, that has become something I use in my business as well. All right, so I've talked at you a lot now, probably sufficiently. Let me do that and appear again. And what questions do you guys have for me?
Yeah.
Yeah, make them bigger so we can see.
There we go.
Was I small?
Yeah.
All right, any more questions?
So what would be your advice to, let's say, a novice content strategist for making the argument that, yes, I can do this, especially when you're first getting started? Like, what's the pathway to do that?
So that's a good question. Uh, so I think one way to do that, I mean, I'll just talk about how I got started. So, I got started basically, oh geez, I don't know what it's in a whiteboard mode. I don't know if did I just like zoom in?
No, you're good.
Okay, good, because it just zoomed in on my screen like to my face really close, but as long as you're not seeing that, it's fine. But basically, how I got started is people came to me with problems. So there are content strategy related problems all around us, right? There are nonprofits. Nonprofits are often suffering from a lack of content strategy, right? They kind of have events and then no one knows about the events. Maybe they're even just using paper flyers. Okay. There are small businesses, and I kind of treat those constituencies a little differently, obviously. But I started solving problems, and people would come to me with a problem, and they'd say, no one can find our website. And so I would say, oh, well, let me look into that. Okay, SEO, what is that? And that's how I found the content strategy was a field. This was, I don't know how many years ago. It happened when I was still a PhD student at Michigan State. So that's 8 or 9 years ago now. But I realized there was a discipline that was about that was about producing relevant content and getting it to people. So that's what I recommend. It's really a practice-based field. So if you want to sort of get your hands dirty, go out there and find a client, and it could be a free client. It could be somebody that you just want to help because they're your favorite cause and they're in your local community. And just be careful what you wish for, because these nonprofits you'll be working as their full-time content strategist for free if you're not careful. But I've learned a lot from actually solving those problems. And then the other thing I say is empirical research. If you find an interesting instance of content out there, that is being used in an interesting way, do an empirical research project. One tool for doing that is the content audit itself. If you do an audit of an organization's content, you can then create a deliverable for them. You can say, okay, this is what we found, but you can also use that for research purposes. And that's something that I really got from Michigan State that, people like Bill Hart-Davidson kind of do. They use content audits as a research method. And it never occurred to me before, then that was a thing that you could do. And that's kind of what Jack and I did for the iFixit project. We inventoried the content on a specific subsection of the wiki, and we used that data to make research claims. Did that answer your question at all?
Yeah, sure did.
Okay. Other questions?
Good question.
If someone were to look into a career as a content strategist, where might they find work, or where should they be looking for work?
That's a good question. So there are definitely lots of jobs right now in content strategy. And there's also lots of jobs that are, I would say, content strategy adjacent. So I'm seeing more and more technical communicators who have job titles that say things like, technical writer / content developer, technical writer / content manager, or they're like a content manager for, like, there was somebody in my class in the fall who her official title was content manager, and her job was to create documentation for this API, application programming interface. So this high level developer thing, right? So I track a lot of stuff, or I pay attention to a lot of stuff on LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn is a great source of information for TechCom. There's a lot of very active TechCom companies and people on there. And you can kind of see what some of the trends are just by the experience people have. But a lot of content strategists, honestly, the really established ones, they kind of work in two ways. And one is very, very hard to do. And then the other, I think, is a lot easier. The first career entry point is doing consulting. And it's very, very hard. Just let me tell you. Like, I will just confess, like if I was making, you know, a ton of money off my side business, maybe I wouldn't be an academic anymore. I'm still an academic because, you know, it's not, you know, this amazingly profitable thing and you just get all these clients, because there's a lot of people out there now who are calling themselves content strategists, et cetera, et cetera. At the same time, pretty much any company that it's kind of like UX. I don't want to make a generalization, but a lot of companies now see that they need a content strategist, you know, in the same way that they know that they need a UX person to improve their application or website, right? So working as a content strategist for an organization is probably the most stable career path. And then it's just, you know, getting experience. You know, it's that loop of getting experience, and you know, you need the experience to get the job. But part of what you can do, and some of our students have been successful with this, is they'll start doing the low-level projects with nonprofits. I have a student that he attributes his entire career to this. You know, I gave him one of my nonprofit clients, and I said, hey, help them with their content strategy. And he did, and because he was able to put that in his LinkedIn profile, he credits that as the only reason he has a job now. You know, so I think there are a lot of entry points, but it's like technical communication, you know, broadly. It's not a linear thing. It's not like you just apply to X organization, they hire you. You know, you kind of got to stab in the dark for a little while. And I haven't seen a lot of content strategy internships is the one thing, which I think is a problem. There are a lot of UX internships now, but I haven't seen as many content strategy internships. So that's a weakness of the discipline for sure.
I don't know if this is like accurate. I'm over here. I'm moderating things. I've seen a lot of things from, I teach the intro to tech class here. I've seen a lot of communications and media and communications people here on campus. A lot of the internships they get are what you mentioned are like content strategy adjacent. So they have like a lot of internships built in that sort of naturally funnel their students into these content strategy positions kind of by accident. Yeah. So I like that you pointed that out as something that like that content strategy internships for technical communicators needs to be more of a thing, because I have pointed so many of the media communication students who are going on the job market towards those jobs because they have the qualifications for it. It's really hard. I just want to throw that out there because you say you don't see a lot of them, and I see a few, but they're not specifically related. It's like saying like we need a technical communicator. Yeah. But I think we should develop those skills. I think you're right.
Yeah. There's lots of jobs in, like you said, media communications, marketing. They may have content in the word, in the title somewhere, but they're not like, they don't prepare you to be a content strategist necessarily.
Exactly.
But they are, that's the type of experience you want to get if you want to be a content strategist. Like, you know, if you try to go the other way, if you try to just do like traditional marketing or something and try to say, okay, well, I'm a marketer, so they don't want that. They want, it's really the same pipeline as a technical writer. You have to be able to write. You have to be able to edit other people's writing. You have to be able to be a good communicator. And that's not the same as a lot of these other jobs. Like, I've met tons of UX people, for example, because I work a lot with those folks too, who are working for a Fortune 500 company, and then they write me an email, and you know, I'm like, how are you working for this big company? Like, you know, so you don't have to be the best communicator in the world to be a UX people. You need to make a lot of deliverables that are often visual. So, you know, if they can do that, they can often get by. But content strategy and tech comm, you know, that's really what we have that other people don't. Is we're good communicators and we're good writers.
Agreed. I can also attest to that. A lot of the media communications people come through, write me emails and stuff that are just completely off the wall, and I was like, "What are you doing?" Yep. So I can see that. That's awesome.
Yep.
So you mentioned that the millennials changed the way that people look at content strategy. I'm wondering if you could talk about the millennials and how they played a role in that a bit more.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of research right now, not from, there is a lot of academic research about millennials, but it's largely them as learners, because that's how we encounter them, right? But as far as the private sector is investing huge resources into trying to understand how millennials consume content. And when you think about this, we're now reaching a point in advertising, for example, where digital advertising spending is about to outstrip traditional. And I mean, this includes things like the Super Bowl, right? Which is, you know, so many $1 billion, just that window of time, you know, and still it's starting to outstrip because they figured out that traditional marketing and even traditional consumption just doesn't work with millennials, right? And if you just Google sometime all the products millennials are killing off, okay, Google laid to that, and you'll see all these products and services that people like me can remember from like the 90s. They don't exist anymore because the millennials are becoming the main consumers now, okay, slowly but surely. And so all these companies are trying to figure out, how do we reach them with our products and services, okay? And it's hard because the more savvy a generation is, like, honestly, it was easy to advertise to us. It was super easy to advertise to the baby boomers. Think about that, okay? To advertise to baby boomers back in the day, you had 3 modes: radio, TV, and print. That was it. If you had those covered, you were going to reach the baby boomers. Now, you know, I've seen these infographics that people have created where it's like these 100 different media that are available, all the way from, you know, augmented reality stuff that people are using on their phones to, you know, the virtual reality headsets. I mean, it's just expanding exponentially. So there's all this work going on. I saw this very interesting presentation at SIGDoc last year by the head of design for IBM. I don't know how they get speakers like this, but you know, at our sort of academic conferences. But they got this. You know, he must have known somebody associated with the SIG. But they brought him in, and he talked about how, you know, he said that content basically is very rarely going to be in text anymore. It's going to be like in audio. You know, he talked about like the new Tesla that has basically just like a touch screen interface for everything. So they're really looking at, you know, what are all the different sort of modes of communication that need to be utilized. On the other side of things, though, there's still a lot of textual content out there. I hear from, like, it seems like every other day someone in the content strategy world or the digital world in general is pronouncing the death of text. Yeah. It's not for years and years and years to come, you know. So that is still a huge part of what we do. But at the same time, all these other modes are getting put into the mix too, and people are starting to pay attention to those. And you know, like Google Voice, they're saying that Google Voice is eventually going to get to this point where it may outstrip textual inquiries. We're not there yet. We're not anywhere close, but that could happen where people just don't want to type into a search bar anymore. And if that happens, that's going to radically change the way we think of SEO.
Any online questions?
No, I think there was only one person watching, and he watched the presentation and said he had a leave request.
Okay, other questions? Alrighty. Before you head out, could I get everybody to stand in front of the screen and you take a picture with us?
Sure.
Thank you. Everybody, would you mind?
How are
The
you
English
doing this?
department has requested that I do this because they no longer have a photographer.
Oh, okay. Okay, I see. How do you want to say this?
Yeah, I can take our video off the screen.
Yeah.
We should turn that. Well, I was gonna say.
Nice one, Jack.
That was the wrong one.
I might have.
What'd you say?
Let me see.
Should we turn this so that he knows when to smile, or should we just tell him? I guess Kylie will just say like when you should smile, just say.
Go back. Sure. Yeah, I turned my webcam off. That was my problem. My fault. Hold on. There we go. Can you guys see it now?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Now what are you gonna do?
I'm coming in a little bit closer.
Really weird because I can't see anything.
Okay.
Okay.
Are you gonna
I'm
take?
going to narrate. I am getting in front of the podium.
Are you
We are
guys
not
standing at
taking
the table?
yet.
No, we gotta get on both sides.
Are you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I can see your face in two
Yeah,
places.
so a couple of the shorter ones maybe in front of the podium, so that we don't lose you in the shadows.
Don't be awkward, but just get up and just
Get up in there, yeah.
All right.
This is already like.
Ooh, this is good. Okay. Everybody's in place, taking one picture. 3, 2, 1. Focusing. 3, 2, 1. And I'm gonna try to take one more from. Ooh, I'm getting weird. Focus. 3, 2, 1. We're done. Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this for us.
Yeah. Happy to. Hope it was interesting, and feel free to touch base with me if you're interested in content strategy. There's definitely quite a few other people in the field, but this is becoming one of my main research interests. So please reach out if you have other questions, and I'll get you guys this recording too.
Thank
That'd
you
be great.
so much.
Yes.
Thank you.
Take
Have a
care.
good evening.
Have a good one.